Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everybody. Today, we are going to talk about something that is going to make you think, potentially think about your life. We're going to talk about the YDM, your defining moment. Think about that for a moment. Do you have one? Do you have two, maybe more? Those times in your life that may have been a reset, an epiphany, all of that. We get into that by way of this gentleman who has a fantastic new book about his life, and it also includes some defining moments. He's somebody
Show a picture of
it. Appreciate that. And by the way, to the engineers and editors, put a picture of that in right now on the screen. This gentleman helps people move their life forward by way of coaching. And I'm talking about individuals, business leaders, CEOs, C-suite individuals. Yeah, all of them. He brings your freedom to potential because we all have a lot of that. Sometimes it comes in our defining moments. We realize it. And he's back with us. Randy Swaim is on the program. Hey, Randy, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm glad to be here as always with you and also Nikki. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you back. Remind everybody the title of your book, please.
Okay, the title of my book, and I just showed the picture here, really, and it's very interesting. It's my autobiography, and it's Bring Freedom to Potential, and the subtitle is A True Story of Overcoming and Soaring Above the Storms in Life, and so it's really about overcoming that and really reaching levels and results that you would not have expected, and all that. So it's a pretty interesting story. I mean, most of everybody that has read it so far has, there's a couple of people that have posted comments, very positive comments on Amazon where it is. And there's a number of people that have sent me emails and texts that are just would almost blow your mind what they said. So there's a lot of appreciation, it seems like, and I'm honored and humbled by that.
I just want to share with everyone that there's a lot of piloting language here. You know, one of those soaring and all that. You are also a pilot and have been and an instructor, have been for many years. So you blend that with the coaching, and that helps people soar.
I do. And you know what? I bring the coaching and I'm also I think you know that I'm at a master level neuroplastician with NPN Hub for neuroscience over in Germany.
Sure.
But but guess what? Aviation is a big area, and training and developing and certifying flight crews and captains and co-pilots and all that. Guess what? That's a big area of where I bring the coaching expertise and the awareness, the neuroscience awareness, and all of that kind of stuff. So that's a big area that I bring it to. That's for sure.
So your YDM, we talked about this, just skimmed it last time we got together. Your defining moment. Can you share one of those with us?
Sure, I'll be glad to do that. And one of the things that I want to just sort of dovetail, because last week when I was on, and I think Nikki was the host for that one, but we talked a little bit about the concept of synergism, and real synergism doesn't mean everybody's thinking exactly correct or exactly the same. It means you're able to work together as a synergism. And one of the things that I mentioned last week is, because this is an aspect where a defining moment can come into play in ways people don't realize. But one of the things that I mentioned is it doesn't mean that you're all thinking exactly the same. In fact, you may have a couple of members. There may be a factor that comes on scene that two of the people that work for you are aware of and have clarity on, and nobody else does. And, can you work together in a synergistic way? Because synergy and synergism does not mean that you're doing exactly the same thing and you're thinking exactly alike. And I had a very nice quote that you can see on last week. So, but the bottom line is, when you're talking about that, guess what? If you do that well and you lead that well, guess what? You may have a couple of people on your team that reach defining moments that are just amazing. And so from that's just sort of where it dovetails out a little bit. But I'll just share one example as you requested, because it's amazing that in my book here, I tell people that I've came from a little bit of a dysfunctional family background, not as the whole gender kind of thing, but just my immediate family. And again, I don't badmouth my parents because they just had their struggles. My parents divorced, and just a lot of stuff going on. They had their struggles, so I don't attack them, and I'm not bad mouthing them, but it's just something that impacted our lives. And as
Sure.
I went forward to that, when I was a kid, every thought I had was about military flying. And I had 7 or 8 plastic models all around my bedroom of different military airplanes that I had glued together and stuff. And I'd sit there and go, kind of thing like that. And every TV show and every movie that I enjoyed dealt with military aviation. But because of the sort of the dysfunctional family background that I came with, when I graduated from high school, all of my dreams were dead. And when I mean dead and buried. I didn't even feel them anymore. I just, it was like, I got a 2-year degree in a medical field, and I worked in a medical field. But then there was one guy at church that told me, and he did not know about my flying background, my flying vision, and all of that kind of stuff. He didn't know anything about it. But just out of golly gee whiz, he and I talked a fair amount just on just general stuff, kind of thing, and worked together for a few 1 or 2 little things in the church and everything. But he told me one day, he said that his father owned a small 4-seat airplane out at a local airport. And he just told me, not knowing anything about my past. And like I said, that past was dead. So I wasn't even aware of it really anymore. But he said, if you ever want to go for a flight, let me know. I'll call my dad and he'll take you up. No. Okay. Yeah, we'll do that. Well, guess what? It turned out that his dad was out of town. So they called. It was a small airport, but they called and talked to the lead instructor pilot at the little, very small flight school there, and set up a time. And so I went down there, and what was kind of amazing is that after the guy pre-flighted the airplane and we're ready to get in it, he looked at me and he said, "So, Randy, you want to get in the left seat?" And I went, "What?" Because I knew that left seat pilots were typically the captain, the pilot in command, and all that kind of stuff. And I looked at him and I went, "What? What?" Like this. And he goes, "You can if you want to."
Mm.
And I just, not knowing any better, I just kind of looked at him and I went, "Well, okay." And I got in the left seat. Well, he started the engines and all that. We taxied out. Once we got landed on the runway, he said, "So, Randy, you want to do the takeoff?" And I went, "What?" Like that, kind of thing. He said, "I'll talk you through it." And I went, "What?" Okay, kind of thing. And guess what? Did the takeoff, rotated. When I felt the airplane leave the ground under basically my control, every one of those childhood dreams came flooding back that quick.
Wow.
Every one of them. I was in the air for 15 seconds and I looked at the instructor and I said, "I know what I want to do the rest of my life." And that week, I applied. Well, actually, it was the first of next week. I sent an application to go back to college and try to go into the military and everything to fly. And I applied at 4 universities. I wanted to go to NC State, and I was excuse me. I was accepted into NC State and got my dorm assignment before I even got hello from anybody else. And I went in, and it was, because it was about 3.5 years after I graduated from high school. But I knew my mom. Now, I got to give one thing I give my mom total credit for is that she worked her neck off to pay to get me through college. But the very first week there, I was in there filling out some, financial help paperwork with the ROTC and all this. And the technical sergeant is standing over me and he looks at me and goes, "Is that your birthday?" And by the way, I'm getting a degree in applied math and physics kind of thing. Applied math, actually, with a minor in physics kind of thing. And he said, "Is that your birthday?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" And he said, "You realize that in order to fly in the Air Force, you got to graduate and be commissioned by your 25th birthday," which was only about 3.5 years away. And I said, "Well, I guess I'll put a plan together." And I had to average almost every single semester, I had to average 18 to 21 credit hours. And I went to every summer school session that I could. And suffice it to say, at the end of 3.5 years, I virtually had nothing left. And at the end of the spring semester, I had 4 credit hours that I still needed. And so I went to the first summer session and I took a physics course that I thought I could do well in, and I got a B in it. And I took a graduate level imaginary calculus course, which is the mathematics that deals with a lot of electricity and cyclic things of pendulum motion and things like that and everything. And the final exams were 4 days prior to my 25th birthday. And I went over to the Harrelson Hall to check on the scores, because I figured I got either a C or a D on the final exam in that. Because like I said, I just had nothing left after 3.5 years. And every day I went over there for about 3 days or so, and no grades posted. And this was back before the internet. So I'm dating myself with that. But on the Thursday before my 25th birthday, I went over there basically 6 times in the day. And the last time I went over there was about 5:45 in the afternoon kind of thing. And all the lights were off, all the officer doors were locked, and no grades posted. And by the way, this professor for this class came from a high power distant culture, and he had a reputation across the industry for not curving any grades. You got what you deserved. That was it. He didn't curve grades anywhere. And I'm standing there with no grades posted like this, and literally everything just went. All of a sudden, my head went down on my chest like this, and the words that came out of my mouth was, "What the heck do I do now? What do I do now?" And about probably 10 seconds after that, I heard a sound up the hall, and I looked up like this, and who came around the corner but this professor? And he walked up to his office door and he said, "May I help you?" And I said, "Sir, I'm Randy. I'm in your Math 501 class. I just need to know if the, final exams were graded yet and all this." He said, "No, not yet." He said, I'm planning on doing that this weekend." And I told him, because this was on a Thursday, and the Friday was my 25th birthday. And I told him, I said, "Sir, listen, here's what I'm planning for." I wasn't trying to manipulate him. I was just telling him why I needed to know tomorrow. And I said, "This is what I'm doing, but I've got to be commissioned tomorrow. So I have to know that I'm graduating tomorrow." And I said, "Is there any way that I can just get you to grade mine real quick so I know either way?" And this professor, who never curved grades, looked at me like this. And if you were me, he's looking at you like this. And he looked that way for about 10 seconds. And then his head did this. He went. And then he looked at me and he said, "If you have plans like that, I will give you a C." And I went, "Sir?" He said, "If you have plans like that, I will give you a C." And after we shook hands and stuff, I walked away. I called the ROTC detachment. I said, I'm graduating, get me commissioned tomorrow. And on my 25th birthday, I took the oath of commissioning, and my sister and my mother pinned second lieutenant bars on my shoulders. Wow. And I ran over to his office again, and he had, posted the grades. And for me, it was C on the final, C in the course. And, but the bottom line is, did he have to do that necessarily? No. Was I trying to force him to do that? Was I trying to play political games? No, not at all. It was a defining moment because it was not about me and any games I was playing. It was all external. There was something in the way we interacted, apparently, that he appreciated and caused him to do that. And what I tell people is that when you're talking about defining moments, it's not about you. It's not about you trying to control things. It's not about you playing this game or that game or whatever. It's external factors that come together. And in his case, there was something about the couple of minutes of interaction. There was something about the fact that he believed in. And I don't know what it was. I have no earthly idea, but the fact that he did that made a huge, huge difference.
Wow.
And what I tell people is that all of us have a defining moment. That was the second defining moment in my life. The first one was when I, 15 seconds in the air in that small airplane kind of thing. But I've had 4 in my life, and those are the first 2. And the point I just sort of get across to people is, don't let your brain disconnect those things. Don't let your brain get in the way. Don't let your arrogance or your control freakish nature try to play little manipulation games, which unfortunately is so much of society's right now. This is an aspect where the factors sort of come together in ways that maybe you didn't expect. And it comes out in a way that makes you go, whoa. Holy cow. And I remember I was the outstanding graduate award winner at F4 qualification training in the F4 Phantom thing. And when he called me up, I was blown away. What most people don't realize, because this is probably about 3 or 3.5 years after my graduation. And I was standing there. The commander called me up to stand behind him in the podium while he talked about why I was chosen with that. And most of the people in the room do not realize this, in the banquet room, do not realize this, but my whole attention was not on what he was saying. My whole attention was kind of thinking about the ceiling. And the only thing in my mind was, Professor, this award is for you. And that was the only thing in my vision and in my mind for that. And so the bottom line on that is just when you talk about true defining moments, and in my story, there's 2 others that my book talks about later on in life and everything. But you know what? Your team, if you're just shutting everybody's brain off and making them just do exactly the same thing the same way every time, guess what? Defining moments don't bring the results because your team's not aware of them.
They're on autopilot.
They're on autopilot, and they just shut their brain off.
Before we run out of time.
Yeah, go ahead.
We have a question, potentially 2 here. So we got about 3 to 4 minutes left.
Okay.
This is Ken in St. Louis. He says, I own my own business. How do you tailor your coaching techniques to accommodate different leadership styles?
You know what? And that's a good question, but you just got to realize that coaching is not about telling people what to do. And figure, guess what? Very often, leadership is not about just telling people what to do. It's about creating people. And that is true. But coaching by its nature will employ different leadership styles because it's very aligned to that. You can ask the kind of questions that get them to perceive that if you have 2 leaders that have slightly different styles, guess what? Depending on their team, it may be both styles are perfect for the team that leader is leading. And yet, at what point are the challenges coming? So one of the first things that I would do is have somebody think about what are the dysfunctions that are coming out? Because here's the thing, if there's no dysfunctions, each of those two leaders may be doing exactly the right thing for their team to connect with them. And so it's just like I mentioned just a minute ago, and last week, it doesn't mean everybody is thinking exactly the same and only one thing is right and all this sort of stuff, but it's getting a sense for how your leader is connecting with the people in your team. And you can still use, if I was working with them and coaching them, there'd be several questions that I would ask on that for their experience and to get them to perceive the experience in their team. And guess what? If everything's going good and the team is successful and all that, guess what? However you're doing it may be good. Now, I would lead them to questions on what are you not seeing and what do you need to think about in that respect. And that could be a question too. But realize that when you're talking about leadership, and I kind of mentioned this last week for sure, that it's not always exactly the same thing every time. Regardless of the people, guess what? With different people, they may have a different way to do it. And a true leader knows how they can sort of adapt that a little bit.
So next, and you know what first comes to mind? We talk about the plane analogies. The wind's always changing. So the situation
you know what? It is.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is. And it's very aligned with organizational maneuverability. Not everything is all purely academic.
So we have just under 90 seconds. And this is Bill in Oakland, California. And he says, I enjoy your podcast. You had talked about conflict. How do you handle situations where a client resists change or feedback?
And what I would do is the things that I would say is if I was a leader and there's a client who's resisting change or feedback, what I would first do is start exploring what's driving that. Because as a neuroplastician, one of the first things I would look for is what is their brain thinking? And at what point is their brain getting in the way? Because in times in today's world, the brain can be doing the right thing in the midst to resist some of these things, but it might also be getting in the way to prevent you from success, kind of thing. And so the questions that I would ask for somebody like that is to not just know the superficial aspect of what's going on, but explore a little bit and let that client explore, why do you not want to make comments? And what's holding you back? Because it may be they think that you're just going to throw me aside if I do that. And it may be something that, guess what, affected two other companies that they worked with 5 years ago. And it may be something that was put into their mind there. And how are you going to change that? And so those are some of the aspects about that you're talking about.
Yeah, it almost sounds as if you should help them figure it out, answer the questions for themselves, as opposed to try and feed, well, you should do this. You should do this.
And that's not only coaching, but that's true leadership.
Right.
When you have some of those conversations where you ask those questions and they just, oh, wow. Yeah. But those are two good questions, but those are just some quick answers to get them thinking about it.
You ever have a question? Instant feedback, Steve@gmail.com, instantfeedbacksteve@gmail.com. To find him, very simple, coachingforrelevance.com is the website. And I know that there's no hard sells here. There's no pressure. You're there.
That's right.
Just have a conversation. See if it's a right fit. If you're looking to make some changes within your organization or just changes within your life, your professional life, just moving that forward, no matter who you are, reach out. He's a nice guy.
I try to be. I try to be. That's for sure.
Yeah. And genuine and real at the same time. Randy, thanks so much for being here today. Really appreciate it and giving us a lot to think about our defining moments.
Sounds good. Well, I appreciate it, and we'll work with you again.
Looking forward to it.
Take care.
We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.